Best way to play the Breeders' Cup and really any races to play through NYRA special promotion. BC19 is your promo code. You get up to a $200 match on your bets and a $25 risk-free bet in either Breeders' Cup Juvenile or the Breeders' Cup Classic. Head to NYRABets.com for more information. Second Breeders' Cup race, it's the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And an interesting race, and this is one that Europeans have had success in, more so than the fillies. And the Europeans have a tough customer that we'll be talking about in a moment. But let's start with the horses based in the U.S., and we'll take a look at the field. Post position really matters, and post position helps some U.S. runners, particularly New York-based runners, and didn't do any favors to both the California player and Hit the Road, but a couple of Europeans as well. And we'll start out with the Pilgrim, which is the prep race that we run in New York. Structor, no big surprise. Chad Brown getting it done in a two-year-old prep race. And I thought Structor ran very well in here. He got good position, but he moved 3 wide in here and thought he ran the best race of anybody. I'm not saying that others didn't run fairly well. Andesite, who's back, got an exceptionally good ride and got a great trip under Javier Castellano. And now he gets Joel Rosario, who's riding extremely well. I thought Our Country was a bit interesting coming out of this race. He gets John Velasquez, and Our Country drew well in the rail. And I thought Our Country is a long shot you want to look at, but no doubt that Structor's a big player. I prefer them over Andesite. Andesite's trip was so good that I think it'll be tough to duplicate that performance. But a horse who many think is the horse to beat goes out for Christophe Clement, who's looking for that elusive first Breeders' Cup win, as well as West Point Stables, and that's Decorated Invader. He beat Vitalogy, and we'll talk about Vitalogy again, who's proven that he's a talented runner. But I got to tell you something, Invader was an extremely visually impressive winner of this race. Was not exactly a strong pace. He found his position early. He made a long, steady run, and he dominated the field in the summer up at Woodbine. Grade 1 or not, I don't think these fields are necessary. I think the Pilgrim was a tougher field, but Decorated Invader was extremely impressive in winning this, and he has to be considered a major player. I don't think Vitalogy is out of it as well, and Vitalogy came back after that race a few weeks later and ran at Keeneland, and he lost to Peace Achieved. In looking at this race, I think it's going to be a little tougher for Peace Achieved, because Peace Achieved is going to have to deal with more speed in the Breeders' Cup race than he did up at Woodbine. He's got Gear Jockey getting in who has some speed. I think that the 11 Proven Strategies will be forwardly placed, and these Breeders' Cup races usually have stronger paces. I thought that Vitalogy ran very well in here. While the pace fairly well held together, Vitalogy came from way back. And Javier Castellano was faced with a very difficult situation. I thought he did the most he could. When you draw that tough outside post, it's tough to be both forwardly placed and saving ground. Javier chose to save ground, and in essence, that put him towards the back of the pack. And unlike anybody else in the race, he made a significant run from last to just narrowly miss. The problem is he's still a little slower than the horses we've talked about previously, so I don't know if he's quite good enough. For me, I have him on the fringes of my play. Let's take a look at the horses that prep for this race out at Santa Anita. Hit the Road, War Beast, and Billy Bats running 1, 2, 3 in their prep race for the Breeders' Cup. That's the Zuma Beach. I have to admit, I was impressed by the winner of this race, the 14 Hit the Road. The rider, Victor Espinoza, just sat in the back of the pack. He saved ground. He angled out on the second turn, 3 to 4 wide, and just blew by the field. I like this effort. It's probably a cut below some of the efforts we saw from some of the East Coast-based horses, but not particularly far off them. The problem with Hit the Road is he drew post 14, and if you couple that with the fact that the major contenders drew inside post, or a good deal of them, it makes it tough for him. He's compromised by his post, and others that might be as good, if not better, got very advantageous posts. And that's why I'm leaving Hit the Road out, but I don't think he's impossible in here. Let's take a look at a horse coming from Florida and Graceful Kitten, who's got some speed in this race, though I think he's going to find this race full of a little bit more speed. If he tries to be forward in here, all he's going to do is force a very strong pace. Hard to know how good the fields he's beating down on that very strangely green turf course down at Gulfstream Park. I don't know. Maybe Graceful Kitten is sort of an uncovered jewel. I don't know. I thought he was a little slower than these, but it's not as though he's out of it, at least on his buyer figures. But let's talk Europeans, because Arizona is this year's entrant in this race for Aidan O'Brien, who had a big effort in here by Mendelssohn to win this race 2 years ago. And this is Arizona's last race where he's losing to Pintabu, who has been a sensation for Godolphin, I believe 6 for 6 over in Europe, and perhaps the best 2-year-old in Europe. And Arizona gave him all he could handle, finishing second, and this was stretching out to 7 furlongs. It concerns me a bit that his best effort came on a soft turf. And believe me, this was a bog. It was also just 20 days before this race. But Aidan O'Brien's horse has had plenty of success, both here and overseas, running horses on short rest. And Arizona cannot be discounted. The problem with Arizona is the post. He drew post 12. And once again, not to be a broken record, other horses got more advantageous posts. But they're also not going to be huge prices. My picks in here, and I do this in a lot of races, I'm looking for a horse at a price. So I put the one Our Country on top. I like John Velasquez getting aboard. Johnny's been riding extraordinarily well, the Hall of Famer. The top of his game, he draws a good inside post, and I think Johnny can get him a little bit closer, and he has had excuses in his last 2 races, and he's okay. Is he good enough? He's on the fringes of good enough, but at a price, I put him on top. Arizona, the 12, I have great respect for second. The 2 Structure and the 4 Decorated Invader, 3rd and 4th. And don't think of them as my 3rd and 4th afterthoughts. These are deep competitive races, and I think both of them are players. This is a race you may want to spread, but I'm going to try to get the long shot, the one, Our Country, at least into the exacta try in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. And you know I'm going to be betting it? I'm going to be betting it through NYRA Bets. And if you're not a member, sign up now. BC19, you'll get a match bonus of up to $200, but also a $25 risk-free bet on either the Breeders' Cup Juvenile or the Breeders' Cup Classic. Best of luck.